Welcome back to the bottom line. I'm your host, Ryan Herpin, and we are talking about effective communication today, the power that it really holds. And I am beyond excited to introduce our guest on this topic, a true expert, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Todd Wall. Not only is he the executive producer here at Now Media, he's also the host of Communication Makeover. It is such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show today, Todd.
Absolutely, Ryan. I love being on Bottom Line. You're doing such a fantastic job of launching this show and getting to the bottom line of these very difficult topics. So I'm excited to be here today.
Well, I value your time highly, and I want to pick that marvelous brain of yours. So let's dive right in.
Okay.
What are some of the common communication blind spots people have that prevent them from being truly understood?
Well, first off, it's the main premise, and this is the premise we operate off of on Communication Makeover. George Bernard Shaw had this fantastic quote. He said, "The biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it took place in the first place." So the biggest blind spot is the belief that I've got a powerful message and everyone is automatically going to be ready with their notepads and pencils and ready to write down everything I just said. You see how ridiculous that is? I can't even say it with a straight face. But it's the belief that all I have to do is show up and speak because I'm so magnificent that they just can't wait to hear what I have to say. No, I think there's a little bit more to it. So, what George Bernard Shaw in saying that the illusion is that it's taken place, that's the blind spot.
I really like how you put that. And it was hard for me to keep it together when you said that because it does sound so outrageous when you say it out loud. And I probably should be taking notes myself because it's easy to forget that in the moment. That sometimes we just automatically believe that we're being understood, that we say something out loud and people just automatically get it and it clicks with them. But how can somebody identify their personal blind spots when communicating?
It all comes down to the result that's received. So, if intentional communication creates an intentional result,
Mm,
if you're not getting the result that you're looking for, don't blame the other person. You're the one communicating. It comes down to your communication. It comes down to, okay, well, maybe I didn't communicate in the way that connected, that created the result that I'm looking for. So if your team is not doing what you're asking for them to do, you're probably not communicating clearly.
mm,
Um, Ultimately, everything comes back to the leader and the leader taking responsibility for what is actually happening. I know there's always complex situations, but you get the result that you aimed for. So if you have a clear target, and really, and this goes into the blind spot as well. If you've done the deep work and you actually identify what that target actually is that you're looking for, then then you can then you can work backwards and okay, then I need to do X, Y, and Z so that T can occur.
mm.
You can see it as in a formulaic standpoint. Here's one of the main blind spot I dealt with early in communication. I was a young pastor in a seminary town filled full of academics, and so every time you communicated, it became the paradigm of not connecting with the audience, but making sure you looked good enough, making sure you sounded like a great orator, making sure you sounded and you looked like the one of whatever the great picture of the great pastor
Yep,
was. And so really the communication wasn't about them, it was about me. And that was my blind spot. The
that's
shift
powerful.
the shift that took place was when I learned coaching from the International Coaching Federation, which essentially is the Socratic method. So when I learned that communication wasn't a one-way street, but was a conversation, was a dialogue, was a loop of a message going out, that message being received and coming
Mm.
back. Oh, this is what we received. Okay, now I need to send it back this way. And now it comes as soon as I see it as a loop, then I'm going to communicate differently. And and we can talk tactics, in our segments, but the big shift for me was, explaining whatever complex issue that I was explaining, but then just pausing and just going and turning it into a conversation. And what would that look like for you? And
I
pause.
like that. I like that quite a bit. That actually kind of touches base on something that I've really been wanting to ask. And I think you're scratching the surface there on this, but maybe in a bigger way than I thought. And that's, why is communication often misunderstood, even with really intelligent people? And I think part of that was understanding that it's not about me. It's that objective, right? It's being able to understand there's that flow, but dig into that a little bit more. How do intelligent people still end up misunderstood?
I would change your sentence to especially by highly
Right.
intelligent people. Here's the paradigm: is they've done the deep work. They know the context. They didn't also they also didn't understand these things on the front end. So, but they're assuming, because they've done the deep work, they've done the difficult things, they've had the aha moments, that all they have to do in their brilliance is say it again, and now everybody's going to get it. So the problem is them not recognizing that this is a conversation.
Mm,
I'm an older guy. I've got adult children, but when my children were younger, and you mentioned your son a little earlier, there's a difference between when I stood over my children and I said, "You need to do 1, 2, 3," versus when I got down on my knee, I looked him in the eye and said, "Daddy needs you to do 1, 2, 3. Do you understand?"
even now, that made me want to listen to it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
I think that's a great example, especially like when it comes to kids, but it does apply in the professional world as well. Kind of like, as I touched base on a little bit before, was it's got to be tailored communication for your audience. If you
Mhm.
go into it with an idea of a result that's best suiting for both people, it's got to be enlightened self-interest, right? It's
Yeah.
got to be a win for everybody. No one loses. You're going to find that approach that's going to, get you closer to that point, right? But at the same time, what are some of the steps that we can take to improve in how we are understood?
First, it begins with the clarity of your message. And are you communicating in a way that's memorable and transferable? So, are you just rattling off a whole bunch of complex information, and just talking at someone? Versus, are you bringing a person into that conversation and then handing it out one piece at a time? You can't swallow the whole thing all at once. So, what is the outcome you're looking for? Now, what are the little individual pieces that I need to be swallowed, to be transferred, so that at the end of this conversation, hopefully it's not stuck in their throat,
Mm,
and they just vomit it out and they move on. So it's just like, if you're in an eating contest, you don't want the whole thing all over their shirt. So
right.
I can't just, if I'm in the hot dog competition, I can't just spit the hot dogs at you. I got to break those things up into smaller bites so that you can digest. It's digestion that is the critical element. It's not this is a hot dog. It's, here's the first bite of the hot dog.
Yeah.
Am I clear on what that first bite is? And then I'm not going to move to the second bite until you've swallowed that first bite. Just like with your son, you're not going to keep shoving that stuff in there. what, happens,
Right.
what happens if you keep shoving it in there before he swallows?
Right. It's gonna come back up. He's gonna choke
It's
on it. It's not gonna. Yeah, exactly. So
it's not
it
going to go
sounds
in the
like
belly.
clarity and simplicity go hand in hand
Mm-hmm.
in making sure the message is understood and people can digest it and really get through. It reminds me of a time when I was very early on in the relationship with my mentor. He could just go for hours and hours about mind-blowing things, and after about 45 minutes of mind-blowing things, my mind is done working. I can't digest anymore. I
That's
can't.
right.
I would try to take notes, but I was fried after about 45 minutes. And here we are 3 hours into a conversation. I can't even handle it anymore. So it gave me all that time of communication that I couldn't really digest.
It's just even as simple as if you pour liquid out on your kitchen counter, you're going to grab a Downy picker upper, you're going to grab the paper towel, but it can only absorb so much before you got to take that one and put that aside and grab another one and allow that to soak up. So the brain in any one session can only absorb so much. And we have, as communicators, we want to give everything out, but we have to understand the capability of the brain to absorb, to process, and to internalize. Because your goal, again, is to transfer that information from your brain that has already experienced all of this, has already done the deep work, into that smaller bite that they can digest. You got to transfer, otherwise, and you can't just throw it at them.
I like
you
that.
just threw those hot dog pieces at your son.
Right.
He would have fun. He'd pick him up and throw it right back at you. But
I think it also boils down to like effective coaches in sporting. Even if you're just yelling at people all the time, you can't expect it to always stick. Sometimes it's that, hey, I'm gonna pull this athlete aside and talk to him one on one and be like, hey man, what's going on in your head?
And that's
Where's
exactly
that
it right there. That position you're talking about right there. Are you going shoulder to shoulder with the person you're trying to communicate with? Are you above them and talking at them? Are you off in a distance, yelling off into the great abyss of what you're hoping they're going to hear? Or are you coming down shoulder to shoulder in a direct communication?
I love that. I find that powerful. That's a good way to put that. It helps you visualize it as well.
It does.
Now, I'm loving this conversation, and I am excited to keep digging into this with you. This is so much fun for me. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Grab your pen and pad if you can. We'll be right back on the bottom line with Mr. Todd Wall.